morning, women of the Crossing. Have we had an incredible Rise 2018 so far? This has been a phenomenal weekend for me so far, and it's not just because there were jumbo pixie sticks last night. If you saw me, you know I was on a mission. I did not know we were going to have jumbo pixie sticks. I thought dodgeball was going to be the highlight of my women's conference. I was wrong. It was a jumbo pixie sticks, and I was intent, and I had one, and I was feeling really good. I haven't had one this morning, though, because I would have been going way too fast if I had had any more sugar this morning than I already had. I am so excited to be here with you all this morning. My name is Kim. I work for The Crossing. I work for our multi-site office, so I have the privilege of getting to do ministry with all of our campuses. And it is one of the greatest honors of my life that I get to do ministry along some of the most influential leaders that I've ever met, and that I get to do ministry alongside all of you. So I am just thankful that we are all here today. And I want to give out a shout of thanks to the teams that put this together. We have a group of gentlemen in the back. And this conference would not happen without them. They gave up their weekend, and they're going to be back here tomorrow morning before anybody else gets here to make sure that we have a service for the rest of our campuses. So it's just incredible that they serve in that way, and I'm just so thankful for them. I'm thankful for the band. I'm thankful for Holly and all of the incredible work that she did to have to put on this conference and then bring an incredible message this morning. So we are going to have a great time for the rest of this morning, but I need us to make a commitment right now. It's been so awesome so far to hear from Tracy last night about a path to persevere, and to hear from Holly this morning about what it's like when your potential is on pause. And we're about to get into pursuing our purpose. But before we do that, I want everyone right now to make a commitment with me that you are going to be a different person when you leave here this afternoon. That you're not going to walk out of here the same way that you walked in, because that is what happens when we interact with the Word and the truth of God, is we are changed. So if you walk out of here in an hour and you are the same person, we have not done our job and you have not surrendered what you needed to surrender today. So make that commitment with me. I want to hear from your boss and your sister and your spouse next week that they don't even recognize you. What did you guys do at Rise 2018? Because I don't recognize my wife. I don't recognize my sister. She is different. Let's be different when we walk out of here today than when we walked in. All right? You on board? Okay, so we've been talking about Joseph this weekend, and I want us to have a chronological look at his life, because it's going to be really important for us to understand the ramifications of what he ended up doing in that Genesis 39 through 41 part of the story. So Holly talked this morning about the first part, the prequel to his life, and how he was one of Jacob's sons, and he was Jacob's favorite son, and all of his brothers hated him because he was the favorite. Any other middle children out there? Where are my middle kids at? I know everyone always forgets about you. So you know what it's like to not be the favorite. I am the middle child. My brother could read before he was born, like everything. He walked on water. So like I can identify with the brothers a little bit because, you know, my brother was perfect. But all of his brothers hated him, and they plotted to kill him. Thought, maybe we shouldn't kill him. We'll just sell him into slavery. Cool. So he's sold into slavery, and this happens when he's 17 years old. So Joseph is 17 when he is sold into slavery and goes to work in Potiphar's house. Now, while he's in Potiphar's house, he's really good at everything he does. Tracy talked about that a little bit last night. So he's really good, and Potiphar ends up giving all of the responsibilities that he has over to Joseph so that Potiphar can literally only concern himself with eating, which honestly sounds like a pretty good life to me. But it wasn't working out so well for Potiphar's wife, because when Potiphar was just eating all the time, she started kind of looking at Joseph being like, maybe this is the better option. So she tries to seduce Joseph. Joseph says, no, I belong to God. I'm not going to sin against God in this way. And he flees. He literally runs away from the situation. Well, Potiphar's wife is embarrassed because she hit on Joseph. She was like putting it all out there for him, and he said no. So because she was humiliated, she goes to her husband and she's like, Joseph tried to attack me. He tried to have his way with me. You need to get rid of him, get him out of my house. So Potiphar, being a good husband, throws Joseph in prison. Now, while he's in prison, again, everything he does, everything he touches is successful. And we know from what Tracy shared with us, that's because the Lord was with Joseph through that entire season. The season of Joseph's imprisonment and his slavery was not lost on God. So when he's in prison, he meets this chief cupbearer and this chief baker for Pharaoh who were thrown in prison because they offended Pharaoh. We don't really know what they did, but they offended him. So they were thrown in prison. While they're there, the cupbearer and the baker both have dreams, and they go to Joseph to interpret the dreams. And Joseph says, well, I have good news for the cupbearer, and I've got bad news for you, the baker, because the cupbearer, you are going to be restored into Pharaoh's service. Can't tell you the same news, Mr. Baker, because he's going to kill you. He's going to execute you. So a little while later, and Joseph asks at this time that the only thing he wants in return for interpreting their dreams is that they would remember him in front of Pharaoh. That's all he asked. He didn't want a ton of credit. He didn't want any money. He didn't want anything in trade for telling them these interpretations other than that they remember him in front of Pharaoh. So Pharaoh invites the chief cupbearer and the chief baker back to his birthday party because Pharaoh obviously was going to throw a really lavish birthday party. And at that birthday party, he decides to reinstate the cupbearer and execute the baker, as you do at most birthday parties. You reinstate someone and you execute someone. But the cupbearer completely forgets about Joseph. 2 years go by. Joseph sits in prison waiting for 2 years after that. And then Pharaoh has a couple of dreams, and he calls for all the dream interpreters in the land, because that was a job description back then. And none of them can interpret Pharaoh's dream. None of them can tell him what it means. And the cupbearer's like, I'm remembering something I was supposed to tell you. There's this guy in prison named Joseph who told me and the baker our dreams, and he was right. So then Pharaoh's like, well, bring him to me. I need to talk to him. I need to know what these dreams mean. They're really troubling to me. So Pharaoh calls Joseph to him, and this is what he says in Genesis 41. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I cannot do it. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. So Pharaoh calls to Joseph to interpret his dream, and then Joseph ends up interpreting the dreams to mean that Egypt is going to have 7 years of really abundant harvest, and there's going to be so much food, they're not going to have to worry about anything. But then the next 7 years after that are going to be the worst famine that anyone has ever seen, and Egypt will be ruined. So Pharaoh's a little nervous, obviously. And then Joseph goes on to say, hey, you should probably appoint some commissioners or some leaders to take care of your people, because if you're able to gather enough grain, enough supplies in your years of abundance, then you can actually take care of your people in the years of famine. And in all of this time, Joseph gives glory to God. We saw on the screen in that verse, he says, I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. So Pharaoh notices that there's something different about Joseph. So he decides to appoint him as this commissioner, as this leader who's going to ultimately save the known world at the time. Joseph was 30 years old when this happened. So he was 17 when he was his dad's favorite and was sold into slavery, and he was 30 when he became one of the most powerful men in the entire world at the time. So there's 13 years in there where he was a slave and he was free. When he was a slave and he was a prisoner. He spent 13 years waiting for something to come along, waiting, and in that time, he was faithful. Now, here's where I want us to take a step back in looking at Joseph's story. Because we know that when we look at this story, this is what happens. He is successful. He gathers enough grain to save all of Egypt. But then people from all over the world come to Egypt to buy their grain because there's a famine in their lands too. And so Joseph is able to oversee the saving of the entire known world at the time. That's a pretty big deal. But let's take a step back and think about what this means in the context of the bigger story. 32 generations after this happened, Jesus was born. Now, one of those families that came to Joseph to buy grain was his own family, his own brothers who sold him into slavery, who probably thought he was dead, who probably wished he was dead. They came to him looking to save their lives, and one of those brothers was Judah. And 32 generations later, Jesus would be born in the lineage of Judah. So now Joseph's purpose was not just in the immediate, was not just in what happened in Egypt at that time. His purpose was felt 32 generations later when Jesus was born. And his purpose is still felt today because every single person in this room is thankful that Jesus was born, right? So here's the thing, though. Joseph does not have the advantage that we have. He did not have a leather-bound copy of his life story where he could just say, oh, well, yeah, I get to spend 17 years being my dad's favorite. Awesome. It's going to be 13 years of slavery, which is a bummer. But then I get to spend 14 years basically being Captain America, and the rest of my life I get to live out basking in the glory of my heroism. He didn't get that perspective. When Joseph was in prison and when he was in slavery, he only saw what was right in front of him. He only knew what was available to him at the time, and this is what he knew. He knew three things. He knew God was with him. We see that over and over and over again in Scripture, that he knew God was with him. The Lord was with him when Potiphar's wife tried to tempt him. The Lord was with him in prison. The second thing he knew was that God had given him gifts and talents and abilities, specifically to interpret dreams, which wasn't always convenient, and other abilities that made him successful with whatever was put in front of him. And the third thing he knew was that God made him on purpose. And we know that because Rachel and Jacob wanted him so badly. They prayed and prayed and prayed and bartered and prayed and wanted Joseph. So he knew that he was made on purpose. And that's what we need to learn from this story. Each and every single person in here was made on purpose. But don't just take my word for it. We're going to do some math. You guys didn't know you were going to get a probability lesson today, but here we are. So, all right, everybody in here has two biological parents. You have a biological mom and a biological dad. Now, we're going to talk about the odds of you being born. So in your dad's lifetime, in your biological father's lifetime, he could meet about 200 million women. It's a lot of women. It's a lot of estrogen. So, but let's say he's got about 25 good years of reproductive opportunity. So in that 25 years, he's probably only going to meet about 10,000 women. So if you divide 200 million by 10,000? 200 million by 10,000, you get, this is a 1. All right, 1 in 20,000 odds. So there are 1 in 20,000 odds that your biological mom and your biological dad would ever meet. But that doesn't guarantee that they go on a date. So let's talk about the probability that they would actually get together and stay together long enough to have kids. So let's say it's about 1 in 20 chance that they would ever meet. And then after that, it's about a 1 in 10 chance that they would go on a second date. Or no, there's a 1 in 10 chance that they would actually speak to one another after they meet. There's another 1 in 10 chance that they would go on a second date. And then another 1 in 10 chance that they would keep dating for a while. And then after that, the odds get better. It's about a 1 in 2 chance that they will have kids after they've stayed together long enough to have kids. So that's, after you multiply all of that out, it's 1 in 2,000. Cool. Okay, so this seems like pretty reasonable odds, right? Well, we have to multiply these things together. And that gives you 1 in 40 million. It is a 1 in 40 million chance that your mom and your dad would get together and stay together long enough to have kids. That's pretty slim odds. If you're single, you can tell your mom at Thanksgiving, like, hey, it's a 1 in 40 million, okay? Like, give me a break. Here's the deal, though. We haven't even started talking about biology yet. So, quick lesson in reproductive biology. There are eggs and there are sperm. And I'm not going to draw any pictures, so don't worry. But every woman is born with about 100,000 eggs. Every man makes about 4 trillion sperm in his lifetime. So, what are the odds that the egg and the sperm that made you who you are with your hair and your toenails, what are the odds of those two pieces of DNA meeting at the same time? That's okay, we have a second marker. One in 400 quadrillion. There is a 1 in 400 quadrillion chance that that egg and that sperm that made you who you are would ever meet. Feeling a little bit like a miracle? Okay, we're not done. I know this is a stretch. I dropped out of calculus in high school, and I took math models in college, which is basically like remedial counting. So, I'm right there with you in the struggle. Okay, so I'm not going to write any more zeros because I've obviously run out of room. But we have to multiply these two numbers. I know. So when you do that and you put it in your calculator, this is what it gives you. There is a letter in that number. That is not a number, it's an equation. This number is so big, I don't even know what the name for it is. Do we have any math teachers in here? Do you know what this number is? That's exactly right. It means there's 25 zeros after that 1.6. Now, here's the crazy thing. That's a big number. That's a lot of zeros, okay? This is the most math that I can do for you this morning, ladies. I know you're disappointed. Here's the deal, though. The name closest that I could find for 1.6e plus 25, which means a 1/6 followed by 25 zeros, is 1 in 160 septillion odds that you would be born you. But it doesn't stop there, because there was a 1 in 160 septillion odds that your mom would be born your mom, and a 1 in 160 septillion odds that your dad would be born your dad. So you are completely improbable. It is impractical that you are here. It is improbable that you are here. And yet here you are. You were made on purpose. There is purpose in your creation. There is purpose in who you are. Now, don't just take my word for it. Don't just take the math that checks out for it. Let's check out what God says about it in Psalm 139. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them ever came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. He made you on purpose. We see he knit you together in your mother's womb before you even had a heart or a brain or ears or eyes or taste buds. He knit you together. Now, Jesus tells us about our worth and our purpose in Matthew as well. He says, he's talking to the disciples and telling them not to worry about their future. And he says, are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the will of your Father. And even the very hairs on your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Now, sparrows, just FYI, are a super populous bird. There's actually not an estimated population count for sparrows because there's so many of them. So God's keeping track of all of these sparrows that are the most populous bird in the world and were at Jesus' time. And they only have a lifespan of 3 years. So God has to keep track of all these sparrows who are dying all the time because they have short lifespans. And at the same time, he takes the time to know how many hairs are on your head and your head and your head and your head and your head, because you were made on purpose. And he has purpose for your life. Now, I know some of you walked in here today and you don't believe me. You think sometime along the way, someone told you that you were an accident, or that you didn't matter. And it's not something that you think about all the time, but it's always nagging you in the back of your head. And you're just thinking, I'm not important. I don't matter. I can't make a difference. No one would notice if I were gone. You're wrong. You are wrong. He would notice. God would notice. The God who keeps track of every time a sparrow drops dead, but still manages to know how many hairs are on your head because he put them there, he would know if you were gone, because he picked you out of a 1 in 160 septillion odds, out of the improbability and the impracticability. He picked you to be here today, this time on this earth, for a purpose. You were created on purpose. And don't walk out of here today believing anything else. We are going to leave any question about whether or not we're supposed to be here at the steps today. But that's not all. Not only were you made on purpose, you were made for a purpose. Now, I think that there's a lot of stuff out there about what your purpose is in life. You could read tons of books, listen to all the podcasts, share all the Facebook links about what your purpose is and how you find it. But I'm going to make it real simple for you guys today. But I want to tell you a little bit of a story first. So I think that a lot of us, we wonder what our purpose is, and when we get to start to actually pursue it. So you think, well, maybe when I turn 18, I can pursue my purpose. Or maybe when I go to college or start my career or get a husband or start a family, or get to a certain point in my career, or maybe when I retire, that is when I will be in my ultimate purpose. That is a lot of time spent doing nothing important, right? If you wait your whole life away to feel like you're doing something important, you're not ever going to do anything significant. And I want to tell you about something that happened in my life. So when I was in college, I decided that I felt called, like my purpose was going to be higher education administration, which is a very narrow definition of purpose. So I decided that I was going to go to Macomb, Illinois, go to Western Illinois University, rack up loads of student debt, study college student personnel, and then I would graduate, and then I would be in my purpose. Then I would be in my purpose of serving and helping college students, all in the name of hoping that they would grow closer to Jesus just by interacting with me, obviously. And so I did that, but it didn't work out the way that I had planned. I mean, I did go to grad school, and I did rack up a lot of student debt, but I did not get a job. So that was the problematic part. So I found myself 6 years of education and no job, and I had bills to pay. So I took a job cleaning apartments in Macomb for college students who had moved out. Not something that I would recommend. If you've never had to clean the bathroom of 4 19-year-old boys, just avoid it. Just don't do it. I'm just saying your life is better without it. But I was furious that I was having to do this. I was completely miserable in this job. And it wasn't because I was spending my days elbow deep in toilet grease and having to clean bacon droppings off of the top of the stove that had never been cleaned. I was miserable because I felt like I was being robbed of pursuing my purpose. I would go home every day and whine and complain about the fact that I wasn't getting to pursue my purpose. And I kept thinking, if I could just get hired as an academic advisor somewhere, I could help some college student pick out his classes for his criminal justice degree, and then maybe he would know about Jesus. You know who I worked with when I was cleaning apartments? College students. You know who I didn't spend time getting to know or investing in or talking to or spending any time with, or let alone bringing up the name of Jesus with? Those college students. Tracy, last night, I didn't know she was going to say this. She said that the reason she came to Christ is because she was a cleaning lady. and one of the other cleaning ladies discipled her. Wasn't me. I was too worried about what my purpose was going to be someday that I totally missed what my purpose was that day. And now there are 4 people in Macomb, Illinois who may never know Jesus because I was being selfish, because I was being so narrow-minded about what my purpose was that I couldn't see that the people around me needed me to tell them about my hope and the light that I had that they didn't have. And I have to live with that. I have to live with the missed opportunities because I was too worried about someday that I couldn't see today. Now, if you are laboring over what your purpose is in life, if you are questioning it, if you're just spending your time on your knees like, God, please just show me my purpose, let me help you out. We're going to go to 1 Peter 2:9. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. I want us to leave this up here right now. If you are laboring over finding your purpose, if you are stagnant, if you are complacent, if you are a statue because you don't know what your purpose is, I got you covered. Declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. That's what we're here for. That is our job. Now, do you think that Joseph ever felt like he was maybe going to miss his purpose because he was in prison and because he was a slave? Do you think he ever wondered if God had forgotten him or if his dream was ever going to come true? Yeah, I think he probably did wonder those things. You know what he didn't do? Whine about it. He didn't complain. He wasn't complacent. He didn't sit there thinking, oh, I'm missing out on these opportunities. You know what he did do? He got to work. And what did he work on? Whatever was put in front of him. Regardless of what season he was in, he worked with all his heart at what was put in front of him, and he gave God the glory every single step along the way. I think as women, a lot of times, our purpose gets wrapped up in our season of life. And we've looked at these seasons of Joseph's life. And it makes sense that we would wrap our purpose up in our season because there's so much emphasis placed on the roles we'll play. Wife, mother, grandmother, specifically. And I don't mean to exclude anyone who's not a part of those. I just know that you get pressure to be that. But God knew there were going to be seasons in our life. We're going to read Ecclesiastes 3:1 and 11. The 2 through 10 part is super long. Go read it later. We don't have time this morning. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the sun. God knows you are going to have seasons in your life. But he has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. God knows that there are seasons in your life. He knows there's seasons you can't wait for and seasons you just want to say goodbye to. But he hasn't set your heart on seasons. He has set your heart on eternity. Eternity is where your mind is set on things above. Your heart is set on things above. It is set on eternity. And that is where you will discover your purpose. If you're in high school, you have purpose. There is eternal significance to the way you spend your days, to the people you talk to in your classes, to the way you spend your Friday nights and the relationship you have with your parents. There is eternal significance. We have been given the purpose of declaring his praises of him who brought us out of darkness into his wonderful light. There is not a day on this earth that should be lost on any one of us because it is a privilege to be here. It was a privilege to be made with a purpose, and it's a privilege to be invited to be the vessel that God uses to share that message with the world. If you're in high school, you are not excluded from having purpose. If you're a 20 to 30 single woman, you're not excluded from purpose because you want a husband someday. Look, I know that Thanksgiving is 2.5 weeks away, and I know that every relative you have is going to tell you about Brenda from accounting who has a nephew that she wants to set you up with, and he's an engineer, and he's single, and I know he's been single for a long time, but it's probably fine. And I know that maybe what you want more than anything else is for things to work out with Brenda's nephew. But for whatever reason, it hasn't, because these are slim odds. But don't lose sight of your today because of what you hope happens someday. I know that it is hard. I know that it is not where you wanted to be or where you thought you'd be. But hey, you're here and you have a voice, and God has picked you out of 1 in 160 septillion. So what are you going to do with that information? What are you going to do with the fact that he brought you out of darkness into his wonderful light, regardless of your season? Any moms in here? It's a trying time being a mom. There's a lot of pressure. There is eternal significance in the way that you talk to your kids when you go home today. There is eternal significance in the way you talk to your husband when you get home and he didn't do the things you didn't tell him to do, but you expected him to be able to read your mind, of whom I am the chief offender. Okay? This is a regular thing that happens in my life. But there is eternal significance in the way that I relate to my husband because my daughter is watching and because you are watching me and non-believers are watching the way that I interact with him. And if I bite his head off because he can't read my mind, I'm not a very good witness to the love of Jesus Christ. So don't bite his head off. I'm telling that to myself. He doesn't deserve it. Are you a career woman and you're just not where you thought you'd be in your career at this point? Someday you hope to have more power, but you will never have the same influence that you have on the people in your life right now ever again. I don't get the opportunity to minister to those college students in Illinois and Macomb ever again. You won't have the same influence you do today, tomorrow. There is eternal significance to the way you conduct yourself in your office. Joseph's most powerful testimony for that 13-year period of his life was that he was good at his job, and then he gave God the glory for it. Are you retired? And you're like, I don't really know what to do with myself now because I spent the last seasons of my life with really specific ideas of what I was supposed to do. Maybe you're caring for aging parents or caring for grandkids, or you just get to spend your days doing whatever you want. What if you wanted more than anything else, that no one that you know would go to hell? Clayton used to say, when I was in Macomb and when the Hensels when Clayton was a campus pastor there, he used to say, I want McDonough County to be the hardest county to get to hell from. What if every single person in this room today made a commitment that their family and their office and their community would be the hardest family and the hardest office and the hardest community to get to hell from? What if we made a commitment that we would take the purpose with which God made us and we would spread that message to everyone we knew and acted like we really believed that we just ran out of that grave and acted like we did stand on the power of Christ? Galatians 2:20 says, "For I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. That the life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God." What if you really believed that? How would your life look different if you really believed that it wasn't you living anymore, but it was Christ living in you? Would you ever stop shouting God's praises? Would you ever stop spreading his message? There is no question what your purpose is. It's going to look different at every season in your life. But there is no question. God has not set your heart in a season. Your purpose is not defined by the season in your life. Your purpose is not defined by your paycheck. Your purpose isn't defined by a ring on your finger or stretch marks on your stomach. Your purpose is defined by the God who made you, who picked you out of 1 in 160 septillion. Your purpose is rooted in eternity. Women's Conference is a great opportunity for us to get together and encourage one another. But what are we encouraging one another to do? Your purpose is rooted in eternity and taking as many people as you can with you there. Ladies, we have a job to do. We have a responsibility. We have a gospel that is aching to get out of us into a hurting and a broken and a dark world. What did Joseph do when he had a job to do? He got to work. It's time for us to get to work. We're moving to a time of decision. I think about those college students all the time because I really regret the fact that I didn't spend more time with them and didn't take the opportunities that have been given me. And I think it's really easy to spend time in regret and not let it propel me forward because I'm familiar with regret, but it's more uncomfortable to actually act on those things. So there's people in my life that need this message. And I need to feel the burden of sharing it with them because it's the most important thing in the world. The most important thing. Joseph didn't understand the significance of what he was doing when he was just being a good second in command to Pharaoh. He didn't know what was going to happen 32 generations later, and he didn't know that you all were going to be sitting in here talking about him 2,000 years later after that. There was eternal significance to the fact that Joseph was faithful with whatever was put in front of him. Now, some of you in here, if you've never accepted or started a intimate personal relationship with Jesus Christ, let me tell you something. He loves you. He created you on purpose. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't unintentional. It wasn't the result of odds. It was on purpose. And he created you with love because he wants a relationship with you. He wants to take you from that path that you're having to persevere, that Tracy talked about last night, and he wants to walk with you. So if you've never started that walk, make today be the day that you start. You can get in that baptistry today. Don't tell me you don't have clothes. We have shorts and t-shirts and sports bras back there for you. So if you have never made that decision, do not let anything be an excuse today, because today is the day that we are going to walk out different. And what a testimony to walking out different than you walked in here dead and you walked out here alive. So if you have never started that, today is the day. You can come up here and pray at the steps. There's going to be people all around that can pray with you, and we would love to walk with you on that journey. Now, if you're in here and you have started an intimate personal relationship with Jesus, I want you to think about two things. I want you to think about that person who's been in your mind since you realized that this was going to be a sermon about sharing the gospel. And I want you to come up here and pray for them. And pray the prayer that Holly talked about this morning. God, please don't let it take a train wreck for this person to come to know Jesus. Just give me the boldness to tell them myself, to share my story, my train wreck, my mistakes, and show how God brought them from darkness to light in my life. Because you could be talking to the next Tracy Strawberry. You could be talking to the next person, to the next Joseph, who's going to make eternal significance out of the message that you share. The other thing I want you to be thinking about is, what is that next step for me? And how do I pursue it? Ask God, what is it that I'm supposed to step into now? And I don't mean big things. I'm not expecting anybody to walk out of here and start a nonprofit or go move to another country. No, you have things that have been given to you right now. There are kids in your life. There are students in your life. There are friends in your life. There are classmates in your life. There are coworkers in your life. So if you don't know what it is he wants you to do, come up here and say, God, what's in my life? And he will show you what's in your life. And you will know what to do with that. And that is to declare the praises of him who brought you out of darkness into his wonderful light. You have an opportunity here to respond and to be changed. And I hope that you will not miss it. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for every single woman in here. You knew that they were all going to be here. You knew that they needed to do something in their life, that you wanted to work in them some way, and that you crafted these messages and this worship and those workshops and the campus time to speak into their life so they would leave different, leave closer to you, leave looking more like you than themselves. And I pray that they would take this time and they would be able to respond, that they would surrender whatever it is they came in here with over to you, so that you can live through them, so that their lives would be more conformed to your image, so that the life they live in this body, they would live by faith in you. And we ask all this in Jesus' name.